You know that person who always seems perfectly content on their own? The one who doesn't frantically fill every weekend with plans, who never complains about having nothing to do, who actually looks forward to an evening alone? Yeah, that person isn't lonely. They're onto something. If you're someone who genuinely feels more energized after a day by yourself than a day surrounded by people, welcome. You're about to understand yourself on a whole new level. And today, we're breaking down the psychology of people who love being alone, the one society calls antisocial, but science calls something far more interesting. Here's the thing most people don't understand. There's a massive difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is painful. It's involuntary isolation that leaves you feeling disconnected and empty. But solitude? That's a choice. It's intentional time alone that actually restores you. And psychologists have found that people who can embrace solitude, who genuinely enjoy their own company, tend to have higher emotional intelligence and better mental health. They're not running from people. They're running toward themselves. But let's dig deeper. Why do some people crave alone time while others can't stand it? It comes down to something called optimal arousal theory. Your brain has a baseline level of stimulation it needs to feel comfortable. For some people, that baseline is high. They need constant interaction, new experiences, external energy. But for others, especially introverts and highly sensitive people, their baseline is much lower. Social interaction, even positive interaction, pushes them past their comfort zone. Every conversation, every group setting, every unexpected text slowly pushes their nervous system into overdrive. And the only way to reset? Solitude. Complete, uninterrupted alone time. It's not antisocial, it's neurological. Now here's where it gets fascinating. People who love being alone aren't just sitting there doing nothing. Their brains are incredibly active. Research shows that solitude activates the default mode network in your brain, the part responsible for self-reflection, imagination, and deep thinking. This is where you process emotions, solve complex problems, and make sense of your life. You can't access this state when you're constantly surrounded by noise and people. Your brain needs silence to go inward. That's why some of the greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators throughout history were known for their solitude. Not because they hated people, but because breakthrough ideas don't come from small talk. They come from the quiet. And let's talk about creativity for a second. Studies have found a direct link between time alone and creative output. When you're by yourself, you're free from social expectations, from performing, from managing how others perceive you. You can explore ideas without judgment, without interruption. You can follow a thought all the way to its weird, beautiful conclusion. People who love being alone aren't bored. They're building entire worlds inside their minds that most people never take the time to discover. But there's another layer here. Some people don't just enjoy being alone, they need it to survive emotionally. And that need often comes from a history of overstimulation or emotional exhaustion. Maybe they grew up in a chaotic household where there was never any peace. Maybe they've been burned by too many shallow friendships or draining relationships. Maybe they've learned the hard way that most people don't actually listen, they just wait for their turn to talk. So they retreat, not out of fear, but out of self-preservation. Because why waste energy on surface-level interactions when you could spend it on something that actually matters to you? Here's something society doesn't want to admit. Being alone is often a sign of strength, not weakness. It takes confidence to be comfortable in your own presence. Most people can't sit with themselves for more than a few minutes without reaching for their phone, turning on the TV, or texting someone. Anyone. Because sitting with yourself means sitting with your thoughts, your regrets, your fears, all the things you've been distracting yourself from. But people who love being alone, they've made peace with all that. They've done the internal work. They know who they are, and they don't need constant external validation to feel okay. Now let's be real. Not everyone who loves being alone is in a healthy place. There's a fine line between choosing solitude and hiding from the world. Some people isolate because of untreated depression, social anxiety, or trauma. And for them, being alone isn't restorative, it's a trap. It reinforces negative thoughts, deepens disconnection, and makes the idea of reaching out feel impossible. So it's important to ask yourself honestly, Do I love being alone because it fills me up, or because everything else feels too hard? Because one is self-care, the other is a cry for help, and there's no shame in recognizing the difference. But for those who genuinely thrive in solitude, who feel most like themselves when they're alone, they've tapped into something most people spend their whole lives searching for: inner peace. They don't need someone else to make them feel whole. They don't need plans to feel like their life has meaning. They've built a relationship with themselves that's so solid, so fulfilling, that being alone doesn't feel like missing out. It feels like coming home. Psychologists call this self-sufficiency, and it's one of the strongest predictors of long-term happiness. People who can enjoy their own company don't depend on others for their emotional stability. They don't spiral when a relationship ends or when friends drift away, because their foundation isn't built on other people. It's built on themselves. And that's unshakable. Here's the part that might surprise you. People who love being alone often have deeper, more meaningful relationships than people who are constantly surrounded by others. Why? Because they're selective. They don't waste time on people who drain them or relationships that feel obligatory. They invest in the few people who truly matter. And because they're so comfortable with themselves, they don't bring neediness or insecurity into those relationships. They show up whole. And that changes everything. There's also something called the solitude paradox. The more comfortable you are being alone, the better you are at being with others. Because you're not using people to escape yourself. You're choosing to connect from a place of fullness, not emptiness. And people can feel that. They can feel when someone is present, grounded, not performing. And that's magnetic. Now, society will try to make you feel bad about loving alone time. They'll call you a loner, antisocial, boring. They'll ask, "Don't you get lonely?" with that concerned look like something must be wrong with you. But here's the truth. They're projecting. They can't imagine being happy alone because they've never tried. They've been conditioned to believe that happiness only exists in groups, in parties, in likes and comments and constant external stimulation. But you know better. You've discovered that the deepest joy, the most authentic version of yourself, lives in the quiet moments no one else sees. So if you're someone who loves being alone, who cancels plans without guilt, who finds genuine happiness in a Saturday with no obligations, you're not broken. You're not missing out. You're just living on a different frequency, one that values depth over distraction, peace over popularity, and self-awareness over social approval. And honestly, that's rare. That's powerful. Tell me, do you love being alone, or does the idea of it terrify you? And if you want to understand the psychology behind why some people can't stop talking, even when no one's listening, the next video is going to blow your mind. Click it. You'll never see conversations the same way again.